Thank you ever so much, Chair Cole, for giving me the opportunity. And before I get into questioning, I wondered if Ranking Member Nadler might want to respond to some of those questions that we were just hearing.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to make one point. Title V of this bill will result in long-term detention of children. This title eliminates the current requirement that DHS transfer children within 72 hours to HHS custody. During the border surge of 2018 under the Trump administration, we saw horrible images of many children held in CPB custody in crowded and often squalid conditions for lengthy periods of time. If this bill is implemented, if Title V of this bill is implemented, the lengthy detention of children in such hard conditions would become standard operating procedure. I thank the gentlelady.
Will the gentlelady yield for a response?
Actually, I want to respond to that first. And I think that I've been at the border following under the Biden administration, and I saw the way in which our Custom Patrol officers were working really hard to make sure that those children were processed as quickly as possible. They were moving them into nonprofits where they were being well cared for. And the problem is one of funding. There had been supplemental funding to provide for this, and we need to continue to provide for that supplemental funding. And what we have to do is fix the broken immigration system, and I think that's what we all agree on, but we should not fix it on top of the backs of these poor children. And as I was there at the border, and you might appreciate this, Representative Burgess, as I was there at the border, I recalled another story of a refugee, another story of somebody, of a mother who was going to send her child to a place that she believed he would be safe because she knew that where she lived, he would not be safe. And so that mother gathered her baby and she put him in a small raft and put him on the Nile River and sent him downstream. Because if she would have kept him at home, she knew he would die. That baby was welcomed. That baby was Moses. And I call upon us here, I call upon my Republicans to think about the story of Moses and imagine what it must be like to be a parent who sends her child north through the Darien Gap, through all of these tragic circumstances, because they want their children to live. They want their children to live. Earlier, we heard from Representative Joaquin that was what was written on the application for his grandmother, that grandmother was sent here in order to live. And I think that is a really key thing of what we must do. Now, I want to address the issue that Dr. Burgess did raise with regards to the debt ceiling, because it strikes me that comprehensive immigration reform, something like the U.S. Citizenship Act, would spur economic growth. Indeed, the last time Congress seriously considered comprehensive immigration reform in 2013, the CBO estimated it would increase gross domestic product by $1.4 trillion. So if we're serious about addressing economic issues in our fiscal house, we would actually pass comprehensive immigration reform, the kind of reform that would make it possible for those who are now here working, those who are now here starting businesses but without papers, that they would then be able to contribute to our economy. I actually am old enough to have participated in the Immigration Reform and Control Act as an attorney helping those who were going to gain lawful status through the IRCA. What we saw was a boost in economic activity from that, a significant boost. But let's talk about bills that we've actually put forth and where do we get that support from. When I'm in New Mexico, I let everybody know, I have a rural district, so I'm talking to my farmers, I'm talking to my home builders, and what I hear them say over and over again is they want us to pass immigration reform that addresses their need for workers, that addresses their need for workers on the ranches, the farmers, that allows dreamers to stay in the U.S. I'm going to ask each of the chairs, yes or no. Does this bill that we're presently put before us, does it address the need for additional workers that we have in our society? Perhaps I'll start with you.
This is a border security bill, not an immigration bill, as I understand it. Once we get border security, we can fix the immigration. The problem is it has been exemplified by this administration's unsecuring the border. It creates an incentive that drives more and more folks into the country. If you fix the immigration system and provide with an unsecured border, it's just even more. So that's why our argument, I think Mr. Burgess was, or Congressman Burgess was making this point earlier. Let's get border security, and then let's talk about immigration reform. But this bill, by its title, and I think by its context,
thank you so very much, Sharon. Because I think that really is a difference of opinion. That I think that what we're looking at is that we can do both. That we should do both, because in order to do comprehensive, you need to address both. And you need to address those things that are most impactful to our issues, which I'll get to in a bit. By the way, did you vote for the Bipartisan Farm Workforce Modernization Act last cycle?
I'd have to go look. I don't remember.
Let me tell you, that Bipartisan Farm Worker Modernization Act, that was one of those pieces of legislation that was worked out by those most impacted, right? It was worked on by the United Farm Workers, and they came to the table and they told us, you know what, it doesn't have everything we want, but it has what we need. It was worked on by those whose businesses depend on those workers. So it was both business was at the table, farm workers were at the table. We had a bill. It was bipartisan. Mr. Chair, I don't believe you did vote. You did not vote for it.
Probably did.
And actually, Chair McCall, do you recall if you voted for it?
I don't believe I did.
I don't think you did. And Chair Jordan, I know you didn't vote for it either. But those are
I'm sure there was some reason in there.
Right. But those are the kinds of things that if we did that, right, that is bipartisan, we would start addressing so many of the issues we have, especially in rural areas like mine. And I'm looking over at our ranking member, Thompson. You and I often talk about the issues that we need addressed in rural areas. You and I, we represent big rural areas. Tell me, how does what we're looking at now impact your rural communities?
Well, thank you very much. I have a large agricultural district that depends significantly on the migrant labor force to harvest our crops. Without it, those crops could not be harvested, to be honest with you, whether the individuals are coming from the southern border or from the northern border or wherever. In addition to that, our challenge is we have a value system as Americans that we have to uphold. The Homeland Security part of this bill would say that those NGOs that were talked about earlier, that if one person they helped turn out to be illegal, they could get no additional DHS funds. And if in my situation, I have a working disaster in my district right now, if the Red Cross or another NGO are trying to help people with lodging or whatever, if they are cited, then they lose all the funding associated with DHS. So we put a lot of people out of work. There are some other issues associated with it, and I know there are some challenges that we have to look at, but those NGOs play a significant part in addressing a lot of issues along the southern border, and for us to try to punish them for their humanitarian efforts would not be good.
We often refer to those NGOs and to the many volunteers who work with them who have huge hearts. Imagine the compassion the compassion that these organizations have. Thank you, Chairman Jordan, for nodding, because you know what these NGOs are facing, and you know they have big hearts, right? But they have a lot of volunteers, and they are there to help out.